All right, it's that time of the week. Start up episode 73 of the Dads and Ed Show. Gentlemen, it is great to be back. It is a beautiful fall day here today in southeastern Nebraska. My name is Josh Allen, one of the fabulous co-hosts of the Dads and Ed podcast. 4 wonderful kids, beautiful wife, tech integration specialist in Council Bluffs, Iowa. Pleased to be joined by Devin.
Yeah, Devin Schoening in Council Bluffs, Iowa, worked for Council Bluffs Schools. It was one of those nights where I thought about doing this outside, but I actually thought I might get a little chilly, so I did it inside instead. But instructional technology program lead for Council Bluffs Schools. I have 2 great kids, Grace and Claire, who were in 8th and 6th grade, respectively, and my wife Erin, who leads our International Baccalaureate School. So yeah. Thrilled to be doing this again tonight, and like I said, I thought about sneaking outside, but I'm going to stay in today.
I thought about that too. The wind's perfect because there isn't any, but it is a little chilly.
A little chilly.
That's good for a lot of things in the fall. I don't know about for podcasts.
That's right.
Catlet.
You can't pick up the cold on a podcast, that's for sure.
True.
Brent Catlett here from Kansas City, Missouri, a development executive for the Apple Education team that oversees Missouri and Kansas. I am married to my wife, Josie, with 5 amazing kids ranging from 11 down to 2.5. And my birthday, boys, is coming up on the 14th of October. This is my favorite month when speaking of fall and cool weather. And Charlie, one of my sons, is turning 6 on the 13th. So he and I kind of share a very close birth dates. So that's always kind of a fun time for me to have that bond with him.
Yeah, nice.
Nice. It is birthday month around our house. We don't start till the 21st, but we've got 2 at the end of the month, and it is other than my own birthday, this is a fabulous month. So
it's also birthday month for my wife this month too.
Nice.
All kinds of October birthdays around here.
All right. All right. If you want to connect with us and tell us when your birthday is, maybe we'll tweet at you if you remember that far ahead. Connect with us by hitting us up on Twitter at Dads and Ed. You can always use the hashtag Dads and Ed. It's getting a lot more play. If you missed part of the show, check out our website, dadsanded.com. Subscribe to the #1 rated show, Dads and Ed. At least when you search Dads and Ed in iTunes and Google Play. And we are a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, which you can find us and all of those wonderful shows like Cult of Pedagogy, Kindergarten Kiosk, a lot of fantastic ones over at edupodcastnetwork.com. Well, not only is October birthday month, it is also the beginning of the postseason. It's when the Major League Baseball logo goes from blue and red to is it a darker blue, a faded blue and orange, something like that. Means it's postseason time. Last night the Twins lost to the Yankees. So the Yankees and Indians will square off in one ALDS. The Astros and Bo Sox square off in the other. And on the National League side, LA will take on the winner of Colorado and Arizona, which is being played as we record this. And the Nationals take on the Chicago Cubs, defending world champion Chicago Cubs, as much as it pains me to say that. So I don't know if you guys saw this afternoon. Dad's Twitter account sent out a poll finding out what our listeners thought, who they thought would be the winner. In the National League, so you have all 4 choices. I put Arizona and Colorado together, whoever the wild card would be. 3-way tie between Chicago, Washington, and Arizona, which I thought was interesting.
No Dodgers, huh?
No votes for the Dodgers, by the way.
That's interesting.
No votes for the #1 overall seed, best record in the majors. No votes to win the World Series. And ironically enough, in the AL, the Indians and the Yankees were the only 2 to receive votes, and they're playing each other. So apparently our listeners have no confidence in the other ALDS. But the Indians came out on top in that vote. So, gentlemen, what say you? We won't do World Series predictions because we'll have time to mess that up here in a couple weeks. Who do you guys see in the ALCS?
I think I think it's going to be the Indians.
Good answer.
I think a couple weeks ago we talked a little bit about this, and so I'm sticking with the Indians. And I think in the other one it's going to be the Astros. So I'm going to go with the Astros and Indians there. But man, the Indians are just so good, so strong up and down the lineup and pitching staff and relief pit. I mean, they're a great team. So I think the Indians will certainly be in the ALCS. Not as confident about the other, but I think they'll go against the Astros.
Catlett?
Yeah, I think Indians, Astros as well. And then I'm thinking Dodgers, Cubs.
See, I think in the National League, I'm still going with I think the Diamondbacks will win tonight, not only because they're winning. I think I said that last time. But I think the Diamondbacks will win that one. I think they'll play the Cubs. And then I'm not sure from there.
I'm not a Yankees fan by any means. My dad growing up was, because it was like the only thing he said he could watch or listen to. But you got to give Aaron Judge what a freshman year, what a rookie season. That guy is just a beast, and I'm kind of enamored with the freaks of nature, like a guy like that, or LeBron James, Michael Jordans of the world. Like, there's only one Aaron Judge that we're going to ever get a witness, and I just thought it was kind of fun to watch him this year chase the record and beat it, and with the home runs. He's a heck of a player.
The interesting thing about him, I can't remember who I was talking to. I don't think it was on this podcast the last time we talked, but they were saying that, he is great. Man, the home runs he hits are amazing, but he also, strikes out a ton and had a streak of something like 47 straight games where he struck out this year.
I think he set that record also.
Yeah, isn't that and that's a crazy record. And it really talks a lot about where baseball is right now. There's so many of those guys out there hitting, a ton of home runs, but striking out like crazy too. You might have a guy with 40 home runs and hitting 220.
Well, 2 weeks ago, the entire major league set the record for most home runs in a season. So right. It's definitely prevalent. I will say, as an Indians fan, I am nervous because I have expectations.
Yeah.
Last year, and we had parent-teacher conferences tonight, so I was talking to a good friend of mine who's a PE teacher and a big Royals fan. We usually talk baseball whenever we're together, and I just said that's what makes me nervous. I see all the pieces there, and I just get nervous. I'm being set up for failure. Last year, it was kind of like what somebody was saying with the Yankees last night, and even Minnesota to some extent. Minnesota lost 103 games last year, and now they're in the wild card. And for all intents and purposes, we're up 3-0 on the Yankees ace. So, they mentioned they were both playing with house money, and I feel like that's the way the Indians were last year with, half their pitching staff gone due to injury, and Trevor Bauer goes out because he cut himself on a drone. And
right.
Now that everyone's healthy, and they won 25 games in a row or 23 games in a row, whatever it was, that just makes me nervous. But
yeah, I want to say too, we talk about the playoffs, and I think that's great. But I also wanted to point out there was a pretty cool moment, Kat. I'm sure you saw this, but the Royals this last week where the four guys, and I'd be curious, are those the guys not coming back for sure? So Moustakas, Hosmer, Kane, and Escobar.
Yeah. I don't know.
Where they kind of brought them all out at the same time, and they had this really cool moment because, man, that team looks like they are really close. Just a close group of guys.
Yeah, it's true. And it's neat because they really from back in the farm system were coming up together. So there is a pretty cool story there in the length of time they were together. And so it looks as if now that somebody, some, if not all, are going to be leaving, and so everybody kind of knows that the writing's on the wall. So it's kind of sad because it's kind of like an end of an era with those guys probably playing together, and they've been together for many, many years. I know I was I appreciate you bringing up that one because I was sitting there soaking on. I pulled up Alex Gordon's stats. He finished the season at 208. I mean, I weigh around that. That's not good. You know, I'm actually less than that at the current moment. I've been fitting into 36s lately, but you know, that 208. And I'm like, we just signed him for a mega deal. And don't get me wrong, he's from Nebraska. I love this guy, but like, I was like, come on. He killed us this season. And when we needed him, 9 home runs is all versus 17 and 13, 19, 20, 14, 23, the last, 6 years. And we did, he didn't, his RBIs was down like this. It was kind of a brutal season with him.
Yeah. I just thought it was such a cool thing with those 4, and they took them out of the game together, and they're kind of hugging out on the back of the mound, and you could just tell they knew, like as you said, everybody kind of knows, sees the writing on the wall that at least some, if not all, of those guys are gone. And I just thought it was a really cool moment. You don't see enough of those in sports now, especially guys like that who end up playing together for so long, and you could just see it. And it's always been true with that team, even with the Salvador Perez, and I mean the whole team. It just is really close. I thought that was a cool moment.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Kansas City will be an interesting story because if you guys heard the news this week, the Atlanta Braves GM quit because he's being investigated for improper handling of international prospects. And Dayton Moore, former Atlanta Braves staff member, could likely go back. Dayton, I don't know. I think probably in baseball circles, I don't know if the casual fan understands how much Dayton Moore means to the Royals and how far he brought them in I think they said 7 or 8 years that he was here. But with this rebuilding process likely on the horizon, will he jump to the Braves and try and build that up? It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, for sure. I had the opportunity to listen to him twice, once in my doctorate class and once at my school district during like a leadership gathering. And just an amazing guy, amazing leader. And he really built a culture of family. And I think that that's what you see in some of that stuff coming out here of late as we were finishing the season, So I admire what he did because he grew up in Kansas and kind of a Royals fan. So it'll be interesting to see if he does jump ship and go back, or if he kind of stays put because this is home, so to speak. But we'll see. But it's a heck of a story what they accomplished with that group, and to make it to the series a couple years in a row and win one, and it's pretty cool.
I always think it's nice too to see small market teams do well. And, Kansas City's been good for a couple of years now. And, you have Cleveland and Minnesota, Arizona and Colorado. I think probably you would consider them not the smallest, but smaller market teams. Mm-hmm. And actually my PE teacher I was talking to tonight, we were talking about the similarities of the Royals and hopefully the Indians. The year before the Royals won the World Series, they were, an out away from, winning, just like the Indians were last year, so close. And so hopefully all that experience, all that unfinished business attitude, as a PE teacher was talking about tonight, translates into a World Series banner here in a few weeks. But
I like the Indians' chances. They look tough to beat.
Yep.
All right, we'll see. We'll venture with that on our. We'll see how good our predictions sound in a couple weeks. I don't know the schedule, but the next time we're on, they should be pretty close to being wrapped up. They're only 5-game series that start tomorrow, so it should be pretty close, if not wrapped up, by the time we have our next show live at ITEC. So
that's right.
All right. Dad moment of the week. We've talked about this in the past. Tonight we had parent-teacher conferences, and for my 2 oldest, and I know Brent. I think you even mentioned it last week, just about what the comments that you got from. I think it was your daughter's teacher, just about how she treats other people, and those are how important those things are. I think we're all pretty blessed in that our kids are. Playing the game of school comes pretty easy to them. We don't have to worry as much about reading at grade level and all this other stuff. So it is nice to hear those positive comments that, Maddox is a friend, and Lane gets along well with others, and they're good helpers, and all that kind of stuff. So you always expect it, but it's always nice to hear. We're fortunate that our second grade teacher that we have, this is our second year with her. So we feel like she'd be honest with us. And the fourth grade teacher has been a friend of mine for a long time. And so, we don't have any reason to believe that they're not, because that's what we expect. And that's what we see at home, to be quite honest. And we know that if it wasn't the case, we'd know about it. So it's always good to hear, though. Sometimes I feel like the parent teacher conferences are just kind of a formality, but it is just kind of nice to go in and kind of hear all that. So anyway, that's my dad moment of the week. Catlet?
Yeah. That's good stuff, Josh. I think that I don't know, maybe it's because we're educators. You're I don't know, it's almost like you just expect it, and I don't know. So it's nice to hear, right? Like that your kids do well and they're well behaved, and I'm gonna go that route a little bit too. So my wife and I help out at our church, and sometimes we get to be involved in our daughters' and sons' classes a little bit, and obviously it's a natural fit for us to help in some of those classroom type settings. And it's interesting, like part of me struggles with like taking over. I'm just kind of a helper, and they have leaders and things, and I have struggled with that. But this would be in regards to my daughter and her behavior, and I'm just so impressed with her amongst sometimes some of the other chaos that's going on in the room with just other kids that are struggling to stay on task or be good listeners. And we kind of preach a lot of that stuff here at home about being respectful and being a good listener, and raising your hand to speak, those sorts of things. And like it's kind of crazy to sit there and just watch her, and even though she knows I'm in there, I'm still just impressed with her. So sometimes I'll sneak over and just say, hey, thank you for being so good. Because there are others in there that are totally not so great, unfortunately. And I don't know, I feel kind of blessed with the fact that the three I have in school at the moment are doing well in the realm of their behavior, like I say. And I think generally the game of school comes to them pretty well, or easily, and so that I would say for me, it's just been some of those moments with her lately, like in the setting of kind of school. It's cool to see her doing so well and being so respectful and engaged. She's like such a good listener and can kind of regurgitate everything that we've talked about and the stories that were shared. And so it's cool. I'm just kind of, sometimes, quite honestly, I'm very humbled by the fact I'm their dad. And I think to myself, like, what have I done? Because I don't know. My wife and I talk about this all the time, but it's like, what am I doing? Or how did we like get so lucky, I guess? Because like, we get a lot of compliments if we're out and about with kids, like, they're so well behaved. Like, and I'm thinking, no, they weren't. I'm stressing out. Like, they were driving us nuts. But like, I don't know, other people that are watching us, say at a Target or at church or at a whatever function, it's like at the festival at the school, like everyone's like, your kids are so well behaved. And I'm like, well, thank you, but I don't think so. Like, so I don't know. It's funny and interesting as a parent.
I have the same feelings, except when I start like walking through a kindergarten, first, second grade building and see other kids, or, I'm in there teaching or whatever. And it's like, yeah, my kids aren't too bad.
Right.
Devin.
I'm going to go a little bit different direction. I'm going to share a kind of dad moment of the week from another perspective. I was in California this past weekend for my grandpa's funeral. My grandpa was 93, and one of the best men I've ever known, and lots of what I have taken away, even though I didn't get to see him much. He lived in California. I've lived here. I didn't see him as much as I would have liked. I took a lot away from him in terms of what it means to be a good person, and lots of my personality and being a good father. And I think that's so much of what I heard this last few days as we were celebrating his life and listening to my dad and his sisters talk about their dad. Think about all those things that your kids are gonna, potentially remember about you, and the things that they'll take away from being, your child for all those years, not only their formative years, but as they become adults themselves and become parents themselves, all those things they take away from that. So I think I was thinking a lot about that over these last few days, and just the impact that really good dads have, and really good parents have, not just dads, but really good parents have on their kids, and how that lasts forever. It's not a one-time shot being a parent. It's something that lasts your entire life, even when your kids are older. So I've been thinking a lot about it from that perspective these last few days.
Yeah. We were actually at a wedding on Saturday night, and one of my grandparents died. I believe it was 2005, and one of his sons was there, who I don't. Long story. He's a step grandfather or whatever, but I'm not. We don't have a long enough podcast for even that. And one of his sons was there, and so his son is probably 61, which, as I was thinking about it when I was growing up, that's roughly the age that my grandpa was. And just, I got a side glance of him, and like all those memories that you were just talking about just started flooding back. Like he looked just like him, and I felt like I was sitting in their double wide trailer, sitting on the couch looking over, and there he was sitting there. And you're right, the impact of grandparents and other non father figures. No, that didn't come out right. That's not what I meant. But other family members that have an impact on your life. It's great to have those times to be able to remember.
It is, and that's, I've said it a million times, especially over this last couple of weeks. Probably the two men that have had the biggest impact on my life were both of my grandpas. And I'm kind of grandpa and grandma less now, as they've all passed away. And that's, even as a 40-year-old man, that's kind of hard to take sometimes, because they really were formative for me in terms of becoming who I am. So yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah. No easy way to transition from that, but we don't have a guest tonight. So I've put on the Dads and Ed Twitter account. So if you're listening to this tomorrow or later, scroll back to October 4th at whatever time it is, 8:54. Devin shared this post, why we need to share our failures. That is on the hashtag as well. So Devin, give us a little overview.
Sure. I was reading that article earlier, and really it came from a conversation I've been having with a colleague. And we were talking about this idea, and we may have talked about it on here before, but I think it's been a while. This idea that we're kind of enamored in education right now, especially, but really just societally, with social media. And what happens on social media oftentimes is the very best representation of whatever it is we're doing. So you think about taking selfies and all the filters and the the things that we do to try and make them look as good as possible. The pictures of food that we take, where we try and make it look like the very best meal that's ever been cooked. And so we were talking about this from an education perspective, and saying that this is the colleague that I've been having this conversation with is a young guy. He was a teacher, classroom teacher for 3 years only, and now he's working in an instructional technology specialist role. And saying it was really daunting to look at social media sometimes, because everything that was shared were these perfect lessons that were happening, these images of kids doing everything right. It's the one that looks like, oh my gosh, how could I would never be able to get my third graders to be able to do that. And it set this kind of like perfect model of what it was. And he was really, it was hard on him to then share his own things, because he felt like he could never live up to that. And so he and I have been talking about it, and he wants to start a blog that really focuses on the failures, right? Or not even the failures, but the things that aren't always perfect. You share those things that, say, gosh, I tried this today and it was it bombed, and here's why, and here's how we can move forward. What did I learn from it, and how can we move forward? And so that's essentially what the article is talking about. The link. It takes you to a post of somebody talking about how sharing that failure can be good not only for you, it can be kind of cathartic, but it's also good for others who are hearing it. It helps them internalize the things that they're doing. It helps them empathize and sympathize with those who, for whom it's not going perfectly. So that was kind of my initial take. And this conversation that, again, like I said, that this colleague and I have been having has been really interesting as we try and get more people to kind of get on social media and start sharing the things they're doing. I can't tell you how many times I've said to them, teachers that I'm working with, don't worry about it. Post the things that aren't great. They'll say, I don't know what I should post, or I don't have anything of value. And I always tell them, you don't get to make that decision. You don't get to make the decision of what's going to be purposeful for somebody else. You just put it out there and allow people to take that and use it however they wish. So, that's kind of been the where that came from. So I was just curious too what you guys think, what others think about that whole idea of like, what do we share? Is it okay? It's okay to share failure, but should we promote it? Should we push for that to happen?
I think to kind of like balance out, I know you guys have heard the term, or we've talked maybe about it, like the echo chamber of, say, Twitter or social media in general, right? And you're kind of around these like-minded people, which can be a really good thing. But I think undoubtedly sharing failures can help each other. And I think they kind of mentioned that in the article about it can be pretty liberating for people if they actually know that, hey, it makes you look human, which we all are, of course. And so unfortunately, social media perhaps has put us in a position where we feel like we have to put out the latest and greatest thing we've done, and you're not really sharing those failures or times where things didn't go so well, but you're sharing the best ones. I don't know why, for chasing likes or hearts or whatever, but like, I think for me, Devin, and perhaps you guys, I mean, I don't know if you did, and I don't care if you did, but I a while back, it was like in November for me, I was thinking about what can I do this year that would be different. And I was kind of doing this whole like New Year's type thing. And I went to my blog and I really started sharing very transparently about really my faith journey in particular. And that was kind of a fascinating experiment for me. Not only has my life changed for different reasons, and I'm not going to dig all into that, but like there was a lot of failure that I shared in that. A lot of very like intimate things that were going on between my wife and I. And what was interesting to me is as I went into buildings within my school district at the time, a lot of those people maybe followed me in some capacity, right? Facebook, Twitter, wherever, and saw the post and would say something to me. And it wasn't necessarily a friend or, more than just a colleague. And it often opened me to conversations with them. And a lot of them would make comments about like how they really enjoyed it and keep them coming. And it really gave me encouragement to kind of keep being honest is the best way I can put it. Because it's almost as if it's not that people aren't being honest, but they're maybe hesitant to share the negative because it makes them look bad. And so, yeah, I love the idea of, and it's not easy to do because you're kind of like putting it out there publicly and saying I failed. And that's a hard pill to swallow for some people.
And I wonder too, so a previous district that I was in, failure was not looked on as advantageous as it is now. So I still kind of cringe at the word failure. I like sharing what I learned, and I like sharing what went wrong. But I also wonder too, if it's people like us, the three of us who are, somewhat well known, at least in our areas, because we put ourselves out there, because we share what has gone well. I wonder if it's easier for us to say, I'm going to put what didn't go well than it is like what the guy you were talking about, Devin, who doesn't necessarily have the good stuff built up that he can lean back on, doesn't have the experience because he hasn't had the time. It says absolutely nothing about the type of educator that he is. Right. But I wonder if that is a little tough for people for people to just start that. I was thinking as you guys were talking, I wonder if I can somehow schedule a reminder or a tweet every afternoon that says what went wrong today. Try like a hashtag WWWT, or I don't know if that's the right amount of W's. I got to write it out. I got to see if that one works, but like just post like every day, like, okay, here's what I messed up today.
Right.
I am missing my teleprompter and I cannot find my fabulous mic that goes with my iPad. I have no idea where it is. And that then I had to use the swivel, and that stupid tracking thing didn't go the way the way I wanted it to. So the first video we recorded, by the end of the video, it had tilted down. So I was getting from the forehead down to the floor of the wonderful guidance counselor I was working with.
Right.
How do I start sharing those types of things?
Right. Because it really isn't about, failure is probably the wrong word. I'm glad you kind of brought that up. It's not necessarily, those things aren't failures.
Right.
It's just showing that, what, things happen.
It's what I learned. Maybe it's what I learned today.
Yeah. It's just because it didn't go perfectly. It didn't go smoothly. I tell folks that all the time, especially the coaches that I work with. Lots of times when I go into work with a classroom or with a teacher, I kind of hope something doesn't go quite right.
No.
Right. So that they can see what happens when things go awry, that, how do you handle it? How do you deal with a little bit of chaos? We had some expedition kits a week or so, 2 weeks ago, that I was working with, and they were just kind of going haywire. And I kind of told the teacher, I said, hey, this is going to go one of two ways. We'll either get it to work or it's going to be a disaster. And I said, I'm fine if you want to say, let's try it another day, or if you want to go with it. And she said, let's just go with it. Let's see what happens, which is perfect for me because that's kind of how I live my life. Let's just see what happens. And we did, and we worked it out, and we figured it out. But it's good when some of those things happen. So I would want to share that. Gosh, it didn't go perfectly. Right. What did I learn from it? Well, what I learned is that if that happens again, here's how we're going to deal with the situation. And I would want other people to pick up on that too. Not that it was some, superhuman effort by the teacher or myself. We dealt with it to see what happened. It didn't go perfectly. And so you're right. It's not necessarily failure. That wasn't a failure. We got things done. It just didn't happen in the way that we thought it was going to happen.
And I always think about, like, if you learn something from it, it benefits it. Like a lot of times when we have an activity, so we used Google My Maps, and so we introduced our third graders to My Maps, HyperDocs, and uploading to Google Classroom, a file to Google Classroom, all in 1 hour.
Yeah.
And when we do these types of activities, we have to do it 9 or 10 times because we have that many classrooms. And so I was talking with our new teacher librarian who hasn't gone through this experience with me before. And I said, here's how this thing works. The first 2 are going to be terrible, and the teacher's probably going to be mad at us. But by 6, we'll be great. This will be awesome. This will be the best lesson. And that's exactly how it worked. Mm-hmm. I learned a ton. I learned that you can't turn kids loose with 3 brand new things when they're third graders. Right. And so we did a better job of walking through by class 4 or 5, and it went fine at the end. But I might have to think about how to do this, whether that's a new blog or a new tweet. I don't know what I learned today.
Well, I kind of have always embraced this idea of a quote growth mindset, or the idea of like failing forward.
Yep.
And I'm going to share to the hashtag DASNED a tweet of perhaps one of my favorite TED Talks by Dr. Tay called "Can Skateboarding Save Our Schools?" And it's just always resonated with me, not because I had any talent skateboarding. I about killed myself numerous times on a skateboard, but like he's a skateboarding stallion, and he shows throughout the video trying to pull off this very complex trick. And I don't want to completely spoil it, but no one's going to watch it. So anyway, so he goes through showing the countless times of failing at this trick, and he ties it to grades. And that was one of the other parts of it that I really love, is if you want to have a grading discussion with the staff or something, like this is one of my favorites that I would pull out. But so he's talking about, okay, and it takes him, I forget exactly what he says, like I want to say, 47 times or 52 times of failing until he finally lands the trick. And the clips he shows are hilarious, because it's beeping out a curse word or two, and he almost gets it, and then it's like sometimes it's not even close, and it's just, you just empathize with him because like I've been there, not that I've been, but in certain ways, right? It's like trying to pick up the 10 pin in bowling, and you miss it and miss it and miss it, and finally you get it or something. But anyway, it's one of my favorites because at the end he finally nails the trick. And he kind of says to put salt in the wound, and he had been slapping these like grades up on the tricks as he got close. It was like a B, or and he finally nails it, and he goes, now what if the teacher in that scenario gave me an A-? And he just kind of looks at the crowd, and everybody kind of laughs because it's like, no, he learned. He finally got it. He finally did it. And there was no sense in putting this like A- on it, like, well, you did it, pretty well, but like, you know what I mean? And so that particular one always resonated with me on this idea of through 52 failures, then he finally got it right on the 53rd time.
Right. And actually, in that case, the grading example, you'd probably say, well, that's, they got a C. If you averaged all those together, all those attempts,
Right.
didn't do very well. So yeah, that's a good one. I'll have to use that.
I love
it. The thing we've been talking about a lot too is to be able to do this, and I think Joshua brought it up a little bit, you have to be open to vulnerability. Like you have to be open to putting something out there that didn't go perfectly, and being okay with that. And and somebody mentioned already, but that's kind of the hard part, right? I mean, we all know that everybody fails in some way, or things don't go perfectly. All the tweets and Facebook posts and Instagram and Snapchat, all the things that are shared out there, we hopefully everybody understands that those are the best of the best. We're plucking those, but how do we, and that's honestly one of the reasons why, we've got a few people now that are using kind of Snapchat in the classroom just as another way to connect with parents. That's such a different medium, such a much more raw medium, where you're not as worried in Snapchat about, in Instagram, I'm thinking about how my photo is taken. I'm thinking about the filters. Snapchat oftentimes is just kind of a raw, here it is, here's us learning math facts or whatever it is. And it's just raw and quick. And I think that is hard for people to not have more control over exactly how that's going to come off and the perception. So it is that being open to vulnerability. It is that understanding that you guys both said it, the failing forward, or the, what do I learn from this? That it's good for us professionally. None of us has ever done something where it's always been perfect, but getting people to be okay with sharing that is tough. So yeah, that's one of those things that we're trying to maybe figure out a structure for. And I like that you're bringing it up, Josh. Maybe we can work together on some of that, how to do that. But how do we promote it and support people and say, no, this is a good thing? Like, I tell my basketball girls tonight at Open Gym, if you're not pushing yourself hard enough that you lose the ball when you're doing this drill, then you're not going hard enough. And it's hard for them to go hard enough, or they're going to lose it because that looks bad. But ultimately, it will help them, right?
Well, and when Brett mentioned the failing forward, I was reminded of my most recent blog post last month. There has been a number of things that my previous school district has done since I left that didn't go well the first time when I did it when I was there. The most recent one was online classes. We tried online classes. I don't remember how many years ago now. I think I put like 6 or 7 years ago on the blog post. And it didn't go well for a number of reasons, but they're back, and I take absolutely no credit for them being back. But sometimes trying something and at least laying that foundation can either spark the idea for someone else later, or like we talked about when we do Breakout EDU, it may spark the right answer from somebody else.
Right.
Hopefully, although there's not very many people left from where I was from when we tried it the first time, but hopefully they learned from our mistakes. The principles are there. Hopefully they said, okay, this is what didn't work, so this is what we have to do better. And fine, if that's what it takes. There's a lot of things that I will say to people just to kind of lay that foundation and let it simmer. And it may not work right now, but it may work later. Go Open is a great example. We talk about Go Open a lot. We really have 2 grade levels that are using openly licensed educational resources right now. And I'm totally fine with that. You know, someone's got to be the beginner. But hopefully as we go forward, we can learn from those mistakes with a wider audience.
I think what I've always appreciated about you guys in this show, and why I just often enjoy these conversations just as much as having a fabulous guest, is just the fact that we're authentic. Like, I appreciate that we can have a conversation about the fact that we're not perfect, and we're not trying to portray this show as this, like, you know, we're the best educators in the world that are dads, and, you know, or whatever. Like, it's that we're just authentic about and raw about what we're encountering as professionals and as dads. And I've admitted some mistakes on here, and I'm not brave enough. I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm not brave enough to admit some of the mistakes I've made as a dad. Probably for that matter as an educator, and like,
or a person. I'll throw that one in too. And not okay. That came out way wrong. I meant myself.
No,
I'm with you on those 2, and I'm going to add mistakes I make as a person.
And it's one of those things where I was just visiting with someone today at lunch about, you know, we were discussing how both of us had gotten divorced. I never saw that on my resume. A lot of people don't know that. Maybe in episode 70, whatever it is, they're like, wait, what? As they're like binge listening, you know. But it's true. It's my family's blended. Like, my oldest boy is adopted from my first marriage, and like I never saw that on my resume, and like it's a part of my life now and something I deal with. And I was 23 when I got married that first time, and when I think about, here I sit, almost 42, birthday coming up here in a couple weeks, it's like I was clueless at 23, and my dad used to try to wrangle me in and tell me that, but I didn't listen. And so I think, like, how can I, as a dad, somehow, some way get through to my children so that in some different way they don't make some of the mistakes I made, you know, and those failures. So like that is like something that kind of overwhelms me at times as a dad, to think like the impact I'm having on these kids is so incredible. And I'd like to think that I'm doing some things well and that I'm successful in my career, and they see that, and I'm finishing my dissertation and doctorate, hopefully, and they see those things and go, yeah, my dad's this and my dad's that, and, you know, he's good at this or he's good at that. But you guys know as well as I do, man, trust me, there are times around this house where if you were watching, I'd be embarrassed. I would be completely embarrassed. Yeah. And that's a fact, you know. And I don't have to get into details, but it's just a fact.
No, I want details. I want details about
episode 74.
I don't know about this episode going live. Can we like cut this thing off and have an off camera or a conversation?
Well, no, but I know that we've had, you know, even in our house, you talk about how much like language matters. And so like when your kids make a mistake, or when your kids, I can think of a really good one, and I think we've tried to be cognizant of this and aware, but I think it's hard. I remember a cross country meet Gracie was at, and she did fine. Like it was fine. But she was disappointed, and like all we got was like, I know you're disappointed in me. I'm sure you're disappointed in me. And it's like, how do you react when those things happen and still have like expectations, right? It's like, how do you have that conversation with your kids? I know this happens a lot in sports, about, you know, you really didn't play all that well, or, you know, go as hard as you could, or whatever the metric is that you're looking at, you know. But how do you say that that's not in a way that, you know, you can still have these high expectations, but you also say, gosh, I really appreciate the way you did X, or I love watching you play, you know, I love watching you compete. I think that language is so hard too, and that comes back to that whole failure thing. Like, I think, you know, I can understand now why people are hesitant to put something out there, potentially, that they might get some, you know, you might not always hear, oh man, I appreciate you sharing that, or man, I really looked at that and I hadn't thought of it that way before, but now I do, even though it wasn't perfect. You know, I think you're right, Brent, both in parenting and professionally, like those are really tricky things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When Devin, when you were saying earlier about, you like it when things don't always go well when you're in the classroom, modeling some of that, I think on this podcast, we have modeled what goes wrong with technology for 73 episodes and over 5 years. So, I think we're doing our part to model that to other podcast people.
Yeah, but we do that on purpose. We do it so that, we cause those problems so that we can show how to navigate them. It's really not,
And overcome. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Superfan Bill Little checking in on his old boss, pointing out that he still thinks he's clueless at times. Little LOL. So good to hear from Bill. And breaking news, gentlemen, we have been added to a new Twitter list.
Really?
Thanks to Brent's post about skateboarding that we retweeted, we are now in the Go Skateboard Vids list.
There you go. There you go.
Hey, whatever it takes.
The list on some of these, top 5, top 4 podcasts to listen to.
I feel like we've officially made it now.
Yeah.
Made that on the Twitter list.
I want to go back to one. There's a little line in this article that I wanted to speak to, that when it talked about, why do you think we're afraid of talking about failure? And it said one of the main reasons is our egos. And again, back to just the three of us in our history together as friends and colleagues, like, I have always appreciated that about you guys. Even though you might have had a bunch of Twitter followers or you had impact with different groups and people, I never felt like you were an egotistical person. And I think that while I have room to improve in areas of my life, I certainly think that that's a true statement, that a lot of folks are so caught up in their own self that they struggle to share those failures for that very reason, because they don't want to look inferior. And the older I get, the more I'm like, man, being transparent has, I'll say I know, has helped others in some of my own transparency. And perhaps sometimes it's been through this podcast, or it's through, like I said, a blog post I've written, or just a conversation that I've had with somebody. And it's just interesting, to think about.
All right. Well, as always, if you have thoughts as you listen, put them on the Dads in It hashtag or mention us in a tweet, and be sure to interact with you there. Let's come to the part of the show where we share some of our favorite things that we are learning about. I am going to put on the hashtag. So those of you know, and let's be clear, I'm not pandering this because we have an Apple guy in the house now. But Apple with iOS 11 is delving a little bit more into augmented reality, which is something that we play around with. The last couple of years, we've used an app called Quiver to celebrate Dot Day, where kids color in the dot. They scan it with their iPad or the Android tablet, and it pops up as a ball. It's very cool. Well, there's been a lot more apps that have come out, and Apple's highlighted to take advantage of the new AR kit built into the camera. One of them was like just a simple Thomas the Train, where a kid can build a train on any surface or a train track. So it's a little bit almost like coding, some entry-level coding to get the train to do what you want. Just drag and drop stuff. Pretty simple, but it's pretty cool. There's another game called Splitter Critters that you can. It's a little bit different because it puts the box where the game is played up in augmented reality mode. But I learned about this jig space the other day. I want to say it was App Insider shared it. So what jig space does is it will take you through different things to let you see how they work. So one was like a key lock. And so you choose the key lock, you find a flat space. It put a deadbolt on my table with a key, and I can go through and see how that key works. It had like a trebuchet that you could put on your desk and watch how it works. And Wyatt, let's go here, and these types of things. I tweeted this picture out the other day. I had an ear on my desk that I could look inside, and it gave me a cross section of it. It's very cool. It's a free app. I think I just saw yesterday or the day before they updated it to add some new stuff. So I'm really excited. I know that Google released like an extension of their expeditions. They wanted to go down the augmented reality area as well. I think they're beta testing some of those. I know we applied for it, but I haven't heard anything back. But JigSpace is the app that I'll tweet out to the hashtag. If you have an Apple device, I don't know if they have an Android one. Now that I say that, it doesn't look like it, but it's very cool.
Awesome.
Devin, you want to go next, or Kat? Either one.
Go for it, Kat.
All right. Well, as I kind of jumped the gun on I Can Skateboarding Save Our Schools for my share, but so I'm going to throw one other one in there. So that would be my share. That's kind of tied to our conversation, which is absolutely one of my favorite TED Talks. But tomorrow is World Teachers Day, and there's a hashtag notable teacher that you can shares a story on, perhaps about a teacher that you've had in the past that maybe had an impact on you, and just let them know that that was the case. And so, as some of us get a little older, I'm starting to run into some kids I taught in 4th and 5th grade that are now, graduating high school or whatever. And so it's kind of fun to, on occasion, very limited, but on occasion, get some of those. There was a girl in my 5th grade class from years ago in Bellevue that sang the national anthem at the teachers' convocation this year. And a friend of mine from that grade school shot me a text of a picture of her doing that. I was like, it was so cool, because this was the same kid that while in high school here, she's I think a senior this year, she had tweeted me, I want to say maybe her sophomore year, with a little index card that I had sent her or in the midst of a class activity that we did, where I just wrote her a nice note saying that the sky was the limit for this girl. She was brilliant. And these were all true statements, but that she had kept. And so she took a picture of that and she tweeted it to me one time, kind of out of the blue, and those are the moments that, for me anyway, it's like, man, it really makes it worthwhile, all this hard work and effort, and so so I don't know. I just think about thanking a teacher or, somebody that you've had around in your life that's impacted you, and shoot them a little message, perhaps.
Awesome. Good one. I'm going to share something I think I've shared before, but it makes sense with our conversation tonight. And it's an older video by Derek Sivers, the obvious to me, amazing to others. And again, I had something else kind of thinking about, but once we got into our conversation, for anybody who hasn't seen that video, it makes sense to watch it along with this conversation about sharing what you create, what you do, and not worrying so much about whether or not it's useful to anybody else, or whether or not it's perfect. It really does just put out there and say our purpose is to share those kinds of things, and let other people decide if it's useful or not for them. So again, like I said, I know I've shared it before. But it's one of my all-time favorites, and fits perfectly with the conversation that we had tonight.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, that's going to wrap up tonight's show. We will have a Monday afternoon show. That is going to be our next one. That would be October 16th at 3 o'clock. Hopefully, we'll be able to coordinate some schedules with some of the people who will be at ITEC. But once we get that coordinated, we'll get that information out. If you recall, last year we had our first second-time guest, and Dr. Robert Dillon. And we know we have a couple past guests there. We just got to figure out if we can coordinate schedules. So, yeah, we will see you from the podcast pavilion in just less than 2 weeks.
That's right.
All right. Until then, have a great couple weeks.